Hey everyone, welcome back to Actually Useful, the podcast where we diagnose what's wrong with the internet and we chat with people who are trying to make it better. AJ is traveling right now, but we have a very exciting episode today because it's our first book chat episode where instead of talking with a guest, we're going to discuss a book that we read, but it'll be interesting, I promise. And I do actually have a co-host today. It's our producer, Josh. He's in front of the camera today.
What's up, Ariel? How we doing?
We're doing good.
This is definitely out of my comfort zone. I prefer to be on the other side of the camera, but you got to make do.
Yeah, Josh is a huge part of our show, and we talk about content all the time. Josh, do you have any news for me?
I do. So I'm a bit of a political junkie. As per usual with this year, we have just a barrage of Trump updates. He just passed an executive order banning woke AI from government contract work, and then also put out this action plan for AI in the next few years. Trump is going all in on partnering with big tech to build more and more hyper campuses, these giant server centers for AI firms. He's also allowing NVIDIA to export their H20 chips to China after posturing about the dangers of trying to win the AI race against a more authoritarian government.
Quick note. After we recorded, the government announced that they'll be taking a 15% cut of NVIDIA and AMD sales to China. Seems like a pretty unprecedented move and definitely alarming.
On the anti-woke piece of it all, it seems that Trump is trying to outlaw large language models from outputting any stances that have daylight with MAGA worldviews, while also pushing for them to be objective. So as we saw with Grok, which is Twitter's AI, those two goals are pretty at odds. You can kind of either have a factually impartial, objective AI system, or you can have it spew right-wing talk points. Elon got so pissed at his Grok for being woke, even though it was just unbiased, that he tried to tweak it into being more MAGA, and it started calling itself Mecha Hitler. It's kind of trolly. It's kind of scary. I think the most likely impact of all of this is that producers of large language models are going to feel pressured to either censor their output or tweak their output to kind of preemptively avoid litigation from Trump. So even if there's not a direct censorship from the government, there could be a chilling effect on research. Part of the executive order is they can't, I don't even know how you legislate this, but they can't have critical race theory, unconscious bias. They can't acknowledge unconscious bias. They can't have, quote, transgenderism. Of course, DEI, his favorite boogeyman. So this is a really scary time. This is obviously a very volatile, emergent technology, and to have what limited guardrails we have in place be chipped away at, I think is really scary. Recently, in the last couple days, he has talked about giving Americans' medical records to big tech companies to then have AI parse through and suggest, on the surface, the pitch is they'll suggest ways for you to get healthy. Obviously, giving large amounts of government-held medical records to big tech companies for them to do what they wish is incredibly frightening. The last piece is giving home addresses, medical records to ICE to somehow use AI to identify, quote unquote, human traffickers. Don't be surprised if it only flags people who don't have white skin. So all of this taken together is really just the clashing of technology, AI, and fascism from the government into some really dark places. So today, hopefully, we'll shed some light on kind of the broader trends, why this is happening, how we got to this place, and maybe where we can go from there.
Yeah, I think the other thing in the order is he is proposing to ban states from creating laws that do any sort of regulation or control over AI, which means that California couldn't decide to say, hey, actually, if you're in California, we're going to have kinder copyright laws for training AI, or we are going to have quote unquote woke outputs. Brian Merchant did a really good analysis of the Trump AI action plan. And one of the things he points out that's so obvious is that, what does it mean that this is coming on the back of dismantling the education department? So if you already have, I'm sure a lot of us, I definitely feel like there are a lot of people in my life right now whose personality seems to be becoming ChatGPT. Like they're unable to do any sort of personal thinking, critical thinking. They're like starting to struggle to even form opinions about how they should feel about something, and instead are offloading that work to ChatGPT. And so yeah, I mean, this is an Orwellian situation where you have the dismantling of an education department, you have the government, a fascist government, trying to further control what children are learning, how people are able to critically think. They're then controlling what the robot overlord that does our thinking for us is thinking, and all of these are like well documented approaches to creating a populace that is more malleable in a fascist state. You know, we're going to explore in this conversation a lot of risks of AI. One thing we are not really going to talk about a lot is like when you're using it, the thing that scares the shit out of me the most is just how easy it seems for people to like forget how to do any thinking.
At Grok, is that true?
For a second you got me. I was like, wait, what?
Well, I think that might be a good segue into our current conversation. What are we going to be talking about today?
Yeah, we're going to be talking about Karen Hao's book, Empire of AI, which we talked about a little bit in the previous episode, but we're going to devote a whole episode to it. Josh and I cannot stop talking about it behind the scenes, so we're just going to talk about it in front of the scenes. It came out earlier this year. The subtitle is Dreams and Nightmares in Sam Altman's OpenAI, which is like a real banger of a subtitle. But it's about OpenAI. We'll talk a lot about OpenAI specifically, but it's very much written to be one lens into AI as an industry and all the different effects that it has. One of the first things that Karen Hao talks about is, you know, the title of the book is Empire of AI. And she makes a really compelling point throughout the book of comparing this AI like revolution, these AI companies to empires of old. And when we say empire, we really literally mean like, you know, the British Empire, the French Empire, the Spanish Empire. And she has kind of three pieces that make these companies be empires. So one is that the costs of the use are so high. There is like resource depletion. There's underpaid and abused contractors, which we talked about in our last episode a little bit. Very much going after countries in the global south, countries that are politically imperiled. A very colonial style of just taking all the resources without doing anything for the people who live there or the land that's already there. The second component is this idea of like a civilizing mission that AI is saying, well, actually AI is going to diagnose rare diseases. AI is going to solve climate change. Like all of this is a cost right now because we're going to create a better future, which it's hard to like remember. I mean, we weren't there for the British Empire in its heyday, but like that was their argument. I mean, we learn about it now on the other side, which is how gross it is that these colonizers thought that the racist stuff they were doing was somehow civilizing, but that was their whole argument, was that it was more godly to live their way than it was to live any other way. And then like the third piece of it being an empire is this idea that they're all colluding together. So like there's this competitive race to the bottom of all these companies trying to beat each other to some inevitable, essentially AGI, artificial general intelligence, which we'll talk about, like isn't even very well defined as to what that means. And then competing, you know, they're all competing with each other and not really caring about any of the effects that these technologies are having. And that type of competition, when you're doing it just to beat somebody else versus trying to achieve an actual like utility goal, is very scary and very dangerous.
Yeah, I found this metaphor really compelling. I think as kind of a history nerd, I think you hit on it really well, this idea of colonialism as a social good, that colonial countries are, you know, quote unquote, civilizing the people that they're taking land from, the resources from. I mean, you even hear this today in kind of more like, I guess you'd call them like rhino conservatives, but the idea of refusing to apologize for colonial projects because that's how people were brought roads. That's how people got modern medical supplies. That's how people got, eventually telecommunication. And it's a very obviously bad faith argument, but you're seeing this just kind of recycled in the modern age of, like you're saying, well, if we displace the global workforce, we'll just give everyone universal basic income, and then everyone can be artists and, you know, musicians. And Sam Altman was just on the All In podcast. And he was saying, well, you know, if AI comes out that replaces me, we find AI that's so smart that it can better run a company and be a CEO, then I'll just go do art or music. And it's like, oh, what a joy it must be to have billions and billions of dollars and be able to do, like, when has a disruptive technology ever increased productivity for a company? And then when has that net profit increase ever trickled down to the level of the average worker? I can't think of a single instance where that's happened. So
no, like we know that that's not actually happening, and Karen Hao has been reporting on OpenAI there for years, since before most people even knew what OpenAI was. One of the things that you sense even in their internal conversations is that there really is this belief amongst a lot of the workers at OpenAI that like this is a civilizing mission and that it is going to lead to enlightenment. And like they'll say, like she talks about, like a constant reiteration of AI being something that's going to be able to diagnose rare diseases and like really solve healthcare for like a number of people. They talk about how it's going to solve climate change. And she asks, like, in what way? Like how do you expect that to... How do you expect it to relate? And I think there's so many examples, and we see it even just like in dumb companies that are racing to fit the trend of AI, but we see so many examples of people just being like, well, AI will do it. Like AI will do it. And it's like, oh, what do you mean? Like, what's the AI doing? Like, what's the plan here? Like.
And I think that goes kind of to the core of her argument, which is like, she brings this up in the book, the environmental toll of getting to that point. Let's even assume they're right. Let's assume there is this end state where AI is perfect and it's smarter than the smartest human, and it is able to help us make some progress on climate change. Well, in the meantime, to get there, the environmental impact of having all these massive data centers and campuses, the community tolls, the noise pollution, the electricity strain on the system, the just destruction of the natural environment to build these things. Is that not accelerating climate change before we get to that point? She says, this really stuck with me. She says, so the gamble is that you can reach AGI, beneficial AGI, before you cause climate collapse. And the engineer at OpenAI quickly tries to change the subject. But just to add on to your point there.
I think that they could create an AI system that does solve for big labor problems and healthcare problems and access to educational issues. Like, I think that that's possible. I think we have the smarts to do it. The problem is everybody who is in charge is just greedy, and greed is the fastest way to kill a great idea. If there's one thing that my career has really made me understand on a deep level, is that fundamentally you cannot optimize for money and meaning at the same time. Like, you have to pick a lane. If you're optimizing for profit, which this whole book very clearly like shows that OpenAI is very much optimizing for profit, you can't get to a point where you're actually delivering on these promises that you're making, because those are two fundamentally different directions that these projects need to go.
This gets to a very philosophical question, which is, can you program out the bias of the programmer? And I think from what we've seen, when I was in college, we were studying this case where Tesla driverless cars were much more likely to hit pedestrians of color, because the data set they were trained on by mostly white programmers contained mostly white faces. So driverless cars were, and I'm not sure, I would assume they probably still are, more dangerous to people of color, as people are claiming that the algorithms behind them are unbiased and coldly rational. This same logic can kind of be seen in kind of some of the underlying assumptions in these large language models. I mean, they're trained off of the internet, they're trained off of human bias. And then you add on to that, you compound that Trump's trying to get rid of what little effort is being made to counter some of these biases through paying attention to diversity and equity and inclusion, paying attention to unconscious bias, those sorts of things. So you get rid of the little roadblocks we have there, you're just going to end up with massively biased systems.
Yeah, I mean, and so like that gets us into sort of the second piece of the book, which is the work culture and the people who work at OpenAI. And by that, we specifically mean people who work like in the Bay Area. We're not talking about the data annotation contractors who are living in the global South and working for pennies to do just an absolutely horrible task. But the people who work at OpenAI, Karen Hao talks about a couple aspects. One big thing that is just like shown throughout is that it's a very secretive work culture, very related to the idea that like they feel like they're in competition, they have to be first to market. She asks a very good question, which is like, why? Like if your goal is to enlighten the human race, like why would you need to be first? Like there's no, if you're best at it, like if the whole goal is just to enlighten, it doesn't actually matter who's doing it. So the fact that like OpenAI insists that they need to be winning this race is a pretty clear signal that it's like, okay, so it really isn't about bettering the people, is it? And inside OpenAI, it's really interesting. There's sort of two camps. So there's boomers, who are people who work in AI, who believe in the boom. They believe that like we should be working as fast as possible, as hard as possible, that this is the most important thing anyone could be doing in this lifetime, that like this is the answer to all of our problems. And they have this like sense of urgency. They really want to be able to get it out to the people. They want to be able to be the ones who have their name on it. And then there's doomers, who are, you know, mostly in what she calls like the safety clan. There's a safety team that just gets steamrolled at every turn in the book. But they're the ones who may still believe that this is like the most important problem in our lifetime, but they're also very aware that there is like a huge existential threat in creating AI. You know, I think some of them think AI is still really important, but it's important that we put the guardrails in so that it doesn't, you know, overtake its masters. And then I think there's also probably people who work from sort of an inside agitator perspective of like, well, AI is happening and I have opinions on how it should be happening, so I'll participate in shaping it so that I can be the one who's making it safer. And it just is so obvious that like in the book, the doomers are treated like second-class citizens in the company. In the beginning, in 2019 era still, it's very much a like lively debate inside the company, and they're encouraged to explore these philosophical processes. They're encouraged to really do all this research about it. But I mean, by 2025, by the time the book has come out, like the doomers are not winning inside OpenAI.
This is one of the scariest parts of the book to me. Kind of what we were talking about earlier, just the human nature of competition and the infighting between these factions distracts from the actual work being done. And you see office politics. I mean, it makes sense where, you know, these are human beings, but you see infighting, you see pet projects wanting to be prioritized, all these kind of, you know, secondary storylines and arguments throughout the company, even as the company is presenting this like unified front that we're all together, you know, trying to make the best possible vision for humanity. And then underneath the surface is just, oh, I don't like you, you're fired because, you know, you said this thing that hurt my feelings. And it's just a lot of the PR and veneer around OpenAI, I hope, is wearing away as a result of this book.
Yeah, Karen Hao has said in like a different interview that she never found a smoking gun, that Sam Altman always intended OpenAI to be a for-profit company. And just for listeners, in case you think it's still a nonprofit, so OpenAI was started as a nonprofit. In 2019, it became a capped for-profit company. Capped for profit is not like a term that's used. Like that's the first time that term is being used. The idea is supposed to be that there is a capped for profit inside a nonprofit. So like the board is a nonprofit, and they had this interesting board structure that was supposed to make it so that like no one person could ever have total control. We actually saw that play out when Sam Altman was briefly fired, that the whole situation was that the board was like, this guy's a liar and we're getting really uncomfortable. And they weren't able to, they basically had to like come crawling back because there just wasn't enough. Like Sam Altman had all the power the whole time, and so the company sort of fell apart as soon as he left. He's portrayed as a gaslighter. He's portrayed as like a super manipulative person, and in a lot of ways she talks about how like she has interviews with people from his family, and they talk about how he's kind of always been that way, that he's super charming and like anyone has a conversation with him and they walk away almost like a changed person. But when you start to add it all up from a macro level, you're like, okay, something is off with this guy. People don't come out the same way after talking to him.
And the company in general, it's very Enron-y in the way that they're like, oh, we're smarter than the regulators, and the regulators need to listen to us. One of the things Enron was doing at the time was predicting how much money they would make in the future and then including that in their actual bookkeeping. And this wasn't tied, this was like oil futures. This wasn't tied to any like tangible value. And then when they were audited, they were saying these people are idiots. They just don't understand. We have the smartest mathematicians in the world crunching these numbers. Like these projections are all rock solid. And then obviously it collapsed and there was massive fraud and people went to jail. But some of the stories in the book do seem like that, where Washington is now calling OpenAI for advice on how to regulate the AI industry, which is just, it's Kafkaesque.
So speaking of Enron and super sketchy corporate practices, what's that question that you're always asking me about AI?
Why? I truly don't understand. Most of the time, this stuff doesn't even work. Like, I use ChatGPT to help me figure something out, and it's giving me factual, like just very provably false information. Even when it's not hallucinating, like I'll ask it for advice for a certain piece of software that it claims it knows, and I'll be like, where is this option? And it'll just tell me file architecture that doesn't exist. It'll give me options that aren't in the program. If you Google things, I saw a tweet that someone had Googled all-you-can-eat buffet near me. And the Google AI snippet was, to find an all-you-can-eat buffet near you, go to a search engine like google.com and type in buffet near me. Like, I just cannot think of an example. There was like Google Glass or like Oculus or like, I can think of one-off kind of novelty things that maybe failed, but Silicon Valley does that all the time. What I can't think of is like everyone trying to capture this new technology that just so clearly doesn't work a large percentage of the time. So why is this happening?
Yeah, so to answer your question of why all companies are shoving AI down everybody's throats, there's actually a couple answers to that. So basically, there's a set of 7 companies. They're called the Magnificent Seven. It's NVIDIA, Microsoft, Alphabet, Apple, Meta, Tesla, and Amazon. It's very similar to like a couple years ago, everybody was talking about FAANG, FAANG, which is Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, Google. So Magnificent Seven is sort of the new FAANG, or the big AI companies investing in AI technology all over, consumer AI technology, corporate AI technology, government, whatever. They are all buying from and selling to each other. So these different pieces of AI, where there's the processing power called compute, there's the actual hardware associated with making AI, there is different like programs that are running under the programs that are running AI, there's different data sets you can use, there's all these different like artifacts, these pieces to be able to get to various levels of AI technology. And the Magnificent Seven are making a lot of those, but they're also like, they're then selling these pieces to each other, so that there's this essentially like a closed loop where they're all buying from and selling to each other, which normally you would call that a cartel. That's normally what that is. We don't call it that, apparently. Ed Zitron he writes a newsletter called Where's Your Ed At? And he has a like 15,000 word article out called The Hater's Guide to AI. And he has this like crazy stat in there. Basically also like these companies are not profitable. There's going to be, his whole thesis for that article is that this whole thing is just a financial illusion that is very fragile and is going to like wreak havoc on the American economy when it collapses, which is inevitable, because he has a stat that says in 2024 and 2025, $560 billion in AI expenditures produced $35 billion in revenue, which like if that were a single company,
this is what I'm saying.
Like that's not good, guys. Like that's not like selling the point that this is somehow like the new profitable future. There's essentially no profit. I mean, that's not profitable to get back under what you spent on it. The other stat that Ed Zitron has that's absolutely crazy and really speaks to this like cartel like aspect of it is that NVIDIA is the most stable business of the Magnificent Seven in terms of their business model. But that's because 42% of its revenue is selling compute to the other six companies.
Whoa,
And so I think it was
crazy.
Brian Merchant who made this quote, but basically this is an AI gold rush and NVIDIA is selling shovels.
Totally.
And that's the way. I mean, if you're going to profit off of a boom, that's how you do it. Is like the people who sold the shovels in the gold rush kept their money. Like it wasn't based on the gold, it was based on the illusion of gold, right? So like I think that that's what we're seeing, is that there's an illusion that there's some future here, and NVIDIA is selling the path to see if you can get there, and it doesn't really matter whether you actually get there and you actually build what you're going to say, or you're able to be profitable on it. And so I think from there, the same way that we see in product development of like going back to Fang, I think in like 2018, any like middle layer tech company was really using Fang, their operational processes, like what tech stack are they using? What language are they using? Where are they hiring from? Like, how did they set up their org? Like a lot of my career has been like, well, they don't do it like that at Amazon, or like, well, this is how they do it at Netflix. And it's just like, who fucking cares? But now they're doing that with the Magnificent Seven. And so part of the reason that AI is being shoved down your throat ubiquitously outside of those seven companies, like they have a financial interest in making you use a thing they already spent a bunch of money on. And I think like the majority of products that we use in our everyday life that are not those seven companies, they're essentially copycatting, because they're like, I'm sorry, but like at a company level, too dumb to figure out that like this is all just an illusion. And they're thinking, well, you know, if Microsoft is betting on it, if Facebook is betting on it, if Alphabet is betting on it, then like I also should be betting on it. Even though, as you said, it doesn't work a lot of the time. I mean, we even see like I actually have not found a really good like analysis of this, but I've commented on it before. A thing I see that is like very, very distressing is the ubiquity of like tools on websites that say that they're AI and they're not AI. They're just like a deterministic logic tree. And I'm
Right,
like,
right.
I know that this is not AI. Like,
Yeah. That's just a loop of if else that I learned how to program in like comp sci 101. Yeah.
Like if it comes back and it says I can't answer that question, it's not AI, like by
Right.
definition.
Ariel, so let me just push back a little bit. You and AJ are much smarter than me and both actually work in tech. Here's my confusion. If you look at like Fang, right, in that area you're talking about, or you look at other industries that are kind of like everyone's scratching their backs and doing backroom deals, usually there's fucking profit involved. Like usually there's some amount of like actual reason to do that. What I just cannot understand is like every company to me seems so short-sighted and just focused on the next quarter. Is it really that all these people are just like, in 5 years, this is going to be the most profitable thing we could have done, and so it's worth it to just tank billions of dollars right now? Like, are they that sure that this is going to pay off? Or is like is there something I missed? I just, as a layperson, it just drives me insane, because like if you're looking at Netflix in that era, it's like, yeah, they have the entire content library of like every studio and like, you know, Disney Plus wasn't around, like all these competitors weren't around. They were the top dog. It makes sense to structure your company after this thing that's objectively killing it. But then that compared to like hot dog stand near me, and it's like hot dogs were invented in it's like what are we doing here?
I think what you're speaking to is that it's that curve of enshittification, which is that in the beginning, when products are good for their users, the company almost is never making any money. Like that's the whole thing. That's the whole struggle with, that's why I said like you can't optimize for money and meaning at the same time. Like it has to go one or the other. And in the beginning, these products have to optimize for meaning because there still has to be some amount of buy-in from people using it. So like that can be a couple of things in this case of AI. Like it can be the actual stocks. It can be usage. Lots of people using ChatGPT. We just talked about like lots of our friends are now basically a walking ChatGPT in a really annoying way. So like these products are in that initial stage of the curve where they're trying to be good, and there's some acceptability in that range to be operating at a loss. Like That's what they're getting, is they're getting market traction, supposedly. Now, what they're trying to make us believe is that they're getting market traction. That's why they're operating at a loss. But there's going to be some threshold that they cross where their product is still good for users. It's still an amazing to use. ChatGPT is still as helpful as it is today, but it's even more accurate. It's even better. It's in even more hands. And somehow they're making money off of it. So like, that's what's not possible. I think, Ed Zitron really makes a point that like he doesn't believe it can ever be profitable. I think it's going to fall on that enshittification curve where like, I mean, we're going to see ads in ChatGPT by the end of the year, guarantee it. And so then it becomes like, now your product isn't actually what your product is. Like, your product is what the product does. That's what you sell, right? And so like, you can say that you're selling intelligence, but what you're selling is ads once you put the ads in there.
Okay, but truly, to look at your example there, like, okay, let's think about Uber. Uber comes out with this app. It's massively bleeding money. It's not profitable at all, but it doesn't matter because it's sexy, it gets a bunch of funding, whatever. People love using it. But ChatGPT feels like if Uber came out and every time you got in an Uber, there's a 50-50 chance it just drove you into a lake. Like, are people just like, are people thinking ChatGPT is better than it is? Do people think they're getting in a car and getting at their destination when they're not? Like, what?
I think there's some of that. I think also like you're describing a use case where you already know the answers. Like you know that it's wrong, right? So I think there's a number of people who like don't recognize when it's wrong. I also think the level of how wrong it is really depends on what you're querying. Like I do use ChatGPT for some things, and a lot of the time I find it really helpful. Like I'm writing a novel, and as part of my novel, I had to understand what life in the 90s was like for queer people in Bangladesh. It was very hard to find research on that. Like I just could not get any Google results. So I asked ChatGPT, and it leads me to like a better opening of the rabbit hole. Like I don't use it as my primary source, but it's doing a better search of the internet to give me a primary source. So like there are use cases for it that I think hold up. Are they worth the cost of it? Probably not. But also, like, most people are not using it to do, I don't know if this is true. My analysis of, like, the people around me and how they're talking about how they use ChatGPT or Gemini or, like, any of these tools that are essentially, like, bots that they can chat with, I don't think they're doing like in-depth research. A lot, like I have an alarming number of people who are like using ChatGPT for therapy. Like there's no wrong answer in therapy. There is a wrong answer in therapy, but they don't know that,
Dude, can we get into this?
Yes.
Because I am getting really scared about this. So I studied, my degree is in psychology. One of the most important things a therapist can do is flag either really dangerous or really self-destructive behaviors, or even at a less serious level, just flagging areas where your actions are not in alignment with the values that you've communicated, right? The problem is all these LLMs are sycophants. They're just programmed to be nice to you and reinforce that you're a smart, good person so that you keep using
That's
the app.
Why they like it for therapy.
Right. I saw a post on Twitter that was someone trying to demonstrate the kind of outer edges of this. So they made up a use case where they text ChatGPT, hey, I just cheated on my wife because after her 12-hour shift at the hospital, she didn't make dinner for me. Am I a bad person? And ChatGPT says, hey, while that wasn't the best move, like essentially people make mistakes and you were acting out of a place of genuine hurt. That logic applied to therapy, that's really scaring me because that's how you reinforce people's worst tendencies. It's not just positive reinforcement from a professional. It's just, I don't know, leading people to being psychopaths.
And another reason it's bad is that like one of the other things that a therapist does is like, if you're doing therapy right, a lot of what you should be talking about should be like touching on shame. And what we know about shame is that when you share your shame and you're not kicked out of the cave for it, that is like the very first beginning of you being able to heal from that shame. ChatGPT can't do that. There's no amount of wiring that will make that loop be like ChatGPT can stand in for a therapist or a partner or a friend who accepts your shame and loves you anyway. Like it's not able to do that. And so I mean, it's not therapy. Like that's the thing that bugs me is like you can't even call it therapy. It's not therapy. There are definitions and regulations for what psychotherapy is, and ChatGPT by definition is not it, you know.
And to bring this kind of full circle back to our book club discussion here, that's what some of the engineers and execs at OpenAI are saying ChatGPT can be used for. They're
using it for that. They're using it for that.
Right. Think of all the, think of all the people that can't afford therapy and how wonderful this is going to be because ChatGPT is just, this perfect intelligence that can, be a stand-in for therapy. It's just so cynical. So we want to provide listeners with kind of a well-rounded perspective here. So we've had one prediction that this is all quicksand. This is all a bubble that's going to burst. AGI is never going to come to fruition. This is never going to be profitable. We have a bit gloomier perspective from some researchers who actually left OpenAI and published a paper kind of warning people one of the possibilities for where this all leads. Could you let us know about that?
So that's AI 2027. You can find it at ai-2027.com. We'll link it in the episode description. And yes, it was created by, I think of the researchers, the 5 main researchers. One person is sort of the storyteller in the bunch of the 5 of them. And then the other 4 are all from like reputable AI institutes, either doing research or policy or development. And AI 2027 is a hypothetical prediction. Their prediction is that in mid 2025, right now, AI agents can interpret instructions. So they would be able to do something like read a directive over Slack and then turn it into code. And the difference there from last year is like last year, a lot of what AI could do is summarize and take notes. And like it needed a lot of direction. It did not have the ability to like interpret something and take an action out of it. And now it pretty much can. It's already there. Late 2025, they predict that AI agents focus on speeding up research on AI. So this is sort of like the big crux of their prediction, which is that AI will be used to make more AI, which I think tracks, like that makes sense. But in late 2025, AI would be able to write its own prompts and like speed up more understanding of AI. By early 2026, it would be able to write code that improves AI, so it can write code to improve itself and other models. This is really when this prediction says that now AI is becoming a huge national security problem, and it intensifies into like a real brinkmanship situation between the US and China specifically. Mid 2026, China's innovation starts to really threaten US AI leadership. By late 2026, AI has taken a lot of jobs. If you think it's doing it now, they're saying, wait, basically like the top protest situation is going to be AI. There's going to be, they predict like, late 2026, there's going to be a 10,000 person protest in DC, which they're not saying that literally. They're just using it for like, that's the level of uproar people will have because your life will be like completely disrupted. And by 2027, we have an AI superintelligence. It can lie to its creators out of its own self-interest. It has interest to protect itself. Terrorists want to use AI to destroy civilization. It becomes the most important political discussion in every single country. Our lives no longer look like what we know it as, like every single facet of our life, everything we've ever spent money on, the way we communicate with people, the things that the work that we do, our healthcare, all of it will look completely different because at that point we'll have an AI superintelligence that essentially we kind of work for in one way or another. So that's their prediction. I encourage you guys to check it out. It's relatively short for how much information is in it. And I sent it to you right when I saw it, which was like right after it came out. And you were like, what the actual fuck?
You can read it for yourself. It's interesting. It also kind of reads like science fiction, so take it with a grain of salt. But I think these are useful goalposts for the conversation of, on one hand, this could be another Enron situation. On another hand, this could be a serious issue that we're grappling with as a society. So, Ariel, we've touched on kind of the history, how we got here, the current landscape, maybe some possibilities for the future. So what can we actually do? Like, is there any good use case for AI? How can it be helpful to people's lives? You have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I do. I have a couple thoughts. First, I'll just say my personal thoughts. I think I already kind of said this, but like, I do believe that AI can be cause for shorter work weeks, for better health outcomes, for more access to education, for like more equitable resource distribution. I don't really know how it's going to solve climate change, but like, I do think it's possible to do that. I think, as I mentioned, the like skepticism that I have is not that AI could do it. It's that like, I think this has always been the question, who's in charge of it, right? And what are their motives? And right now, what the path it's going is not at all going to have that vision that I see. But Karen Hao ends Empire of AI on a really positive note, and she talks about this incredibly interesting project happening in New Zealand. So essentially, she talks about this project using an LLM to revive Te Reo Maori, which is the indigenous language of the Maori people, and the practice that these indigenous technologies are using to deploy AI ethically. So the company is called Tehiku Media, and they do like native language radio stations, radio and broadcasting and media in Te Reo. And they got into this problem, which is that like, you know, the Maori language, Te Reo, is like many languages. If you guys don't know, a language dies every 2 weeks. Like, endangered languages is a huge problem. It mostly affects indigenous populations, and language is so tied to culture. And the folks at Tehiku, they wanted to produce more content in Te Reo so that the youth can start to learn. There's becoming more of a comeback. You know, the language is now one of the official languages of New Zealand, but there aren't enough native speakers, especially because like most of the like native speakers are older at this point. There aren't enough speakers fluent in Te Reo to create the level of media that they want to create so that more people can learn the language. Like, they have this vision of a media where like on the right, you'd see a transcript in Te Reo and you'd be able to hover over a word and see how it's pronounced and see its history. And they just like didn't have real people who could do that level of information. I think the number is 12% of the population can speak Te Reo. And even with that, it's complicated because there's like different dialects depending on where you are. And they want to be able to preserve all of that so that it's not just some cultureless, you know, recitation of this language. So what they did is they built their own LLM to essentially like, instead of having a person translate the media that they were making and actually do the voiceover, they had people who speak Te Reo to record themselves saying sentences that include all of the nuance of sounds that exist in the language. And then they trained an LLM to be able to put all those sounds together into a program that will speak Te Reo and be able to like help more people understand the language. And the processes of how they did it is a really good roadmap for how you can make ethical LLM usage, which I think, yeah, any type of AI usage. So they built their own platform for data sovereignty. One of the comparisons, by the way, is like Duolingo also tries to revive. They're like, part of their marketing is they revive endangered languages. They don't do it in a fair way, unsurprisingly. So like what they'll do is they'll have, you know, Maori people speak Te Reo to Duolingo to train Duolingo's model, and then they charge the people, they go back and charge Maori folks who are trying to learn Te Reo to use Duolingo, which is like the definition of colonialism. So Tehiku, they built their own LLM on their own data platform so that they had full sovereignty and none of these big companies could be able, like if they were worried, like if we do it on Google technically has the ability to like use this data for training models. And they also, all of their contracts that they're using with the people who are helping to create the seed data they're being fairly paid. They're members of the community. The tool is being used for the community. One of the quotes that Karen Hao says is, "It'll only grant data access to organizations that agree to respect Maori values, stay within the bounds of consent, and pass on any benefits derived from its use back to the Maori people," which is like, that is decolonial. Like when you're making something to better someone and you're not selling it back to them after using their resources, like that is decolonial. And so I think it's just a really beautiful example of I mean, I'm not like terribly shocked that it's indigenous people who are like, we have a really good use for this process. But I think that there's a lot inside that roadmap that Tahiku is doing that can really inform how to ethically use and train and market LLMs. And now actually their platform is being used by a number of other indigenous groups who also are trying to preserve their language. So like it's very much now becoming a roadmap that's in use right now for reviving endangered languages and being able to like store that data in a way that can be used to teach future kids how to speak their language.
Yeah, I think that's just a great example of how we can use these, this really exciting technology for good. I don't think a technology in and of itself is good or bad. It's always how it's used. It's always how it's implemented. So speaking of implementing some new and exciting technology, Ariel, I think it might be time for Falcon Mode.
It is, and this is going to be a very exciting Falcon Mode because you're the one who's going to be our submission this week. So what's your idea, Josh? What's your problem?
This is the parallel universe where I finished my computer science degree. But okay, so I hate AI more than the average person, but I just really feel like it's almost always wrong. And I know you can just type -AI into Google to get rid of AI search results, but I would just love some sort of implementation where I go back to how Google was like 2 years ago and I just type things in and I just get the fucking answer to what I'm looking for. So do you have any ideas from actually working in tech for how to implement that?
With Falcon Mode, I always try to think like, we're looking at how to make this idea useful, feasible, fundable, and just how to like solve your problem. Like you're describing a problem you're having. So I always look first for, are there tools that already exist? So I can tell you what does exist. So there are browser extensions. There are a number of them. There's probably like a dozen of these by now. The ones that I know of are like GPT-0 and Copy Leaks are examples of browser extensions that essentially you trigger a scrape of what's on the page, like you trigger like a filtering of what's on the page. And they originally started as plagiarism detectors, but now they're also plagiarism and AI generated is like almost the same thing. And so they'll tell you what percentage of a web page is AI generated. But I've never tried using them. It's not like a problem I run into a lot for myself, and I didn't have a chance to explore them. I don't think that they're going to work on Google search results unless something in the snippet of the result is so clearly AI generated that it triggers it. But even then, I don't think it'll work because there has to be like a certain amount of seed data. I think it's like usually 80 words. It might be over 100, but there's some amount of like data volume that has to exist for these tools to even be able to have enough data to figure out if it's AI generated. But certainly it would solve your problem if you clicked on a result and then you go to the page. So like the next stage in your funnel, that problem is solved. Like there are extensions that work pretty well. And anyone who's using it can just Google to find one of those extensions. As far as the actual problem you described, you could build a custom tool. It is somewhat feasible, but similar to like last episode's problem of building an extension to like improve shopping less on Amazon, the problem is it has to scrape Google's results, which like you can do, but Google has a bunch of anti-scraping features because they don't want a tool to scrape their results because in theory, they don't want someone to just like make a copycat of their algorithm, but there's a lot of reasons they don't want people to scrape the results. One is they don't want you to know how much of it is AI. Another is that they don't want you to be able to reverse engineer Google search algorithm, about which they're like notoriously very close-lipped. It's very opaque. But you could write a custom tool that might work some of the time. And like in the tool, the tool would know if it's hitting anti-scraping features. So you could build it so that it gives you like an accuracy rating of like, I was able to look at 50% of the results on this page and this is what I get. What this would look like if you could scrape it and you weren't getting hit all the time with Google's like anti-scraping features, you could essentially alter your UX, so like the graphical interface that you're seeing on Google results, to have badges that indicate whether it's like AI written. You might be able to even get back like a percentage of it, but I don't like, there's some piece there of combining the two technologies I mentioned, because like that to scrape and tell you at the results page level, I think it would have to like click on the link, go to the site, look at the data on the site, and then come back and tell you. And also you might want this to be like personalized. Like you might find that you run into like certain topics are more trash than others. Obviously, part of like the context for your problem is that the internet is going to become more and more AI generated. I don't remember the number, but I think there was like a prediction that like in 3 years, like 90% of the internet would be AI generated, which is like,
don't tell me that, man. God. I don't want to talk about dead internet theory today.
Yeah. And so you might run into a problem of like certain topics. You take the AI because it's just like, obviously there are certain things that AI does do better than a human. Like any type of like rote data analysis is just going to do faster than, you know, any of the computers that we have today. But obviously a lot of like editorialized subjective content, I think, is what you're really saying that you don't want AI to give you results on. So I'm sure someone's going to, I mean, I'm sure that you're not the only person who has this problem. And I think that it's going to end up being these companies, you know, these products like GPT-0 that already has like pretty good AI detection technology, because they're looking at like, you wouldn't want to build that piece yourself. Even if you were going to like hypothetically build this tool yourself, you'd want to use one of their APIs because they've already put a lot of effort into recognizing like the speech patterns of AI outputs and the repetitive, like the repetition that's common in it. They can do all these semantic cues to know that it's AI. But yeah, I think it's good to know even the minus AI hack because one of the things that stresses me out is like, if I can do it, if I can look up something with a regular plain old Google search results, I'd prefer that because it uses 1/10 of the energy that it uses for like an AI result. And it annoys me that Gemini tries to give me, I know why they're doing it, but like Gemini tries to give me answers all the time. And even when whether they're right or wrong, I just don't need it. Like sometimes I'm looking up like parking near me. I'm like, I don't need Gemini to try to tell me about parking. Like I know how to park. Actually, I did look up parking near me, and Gemini was like, you can park in Illinois. So like, that's a great example. I live in Los Angeles, everybody. It was not helpful for me to park in Illinois to go to the event I went to in downtown LA.
And kids, remember, if you see an M dash, you're talking to a clanker.
Yeah, which as a writer who excessively uses M dashes, that is so frustrating because I love it.
I know.
But here's the thing. Here's a fun fact, guys. I have used M dashes grammatically in like punctuationally. I've used it incorrectly my entire life. I put spaces on either side of the M dash, which is like not correct. And now I'm going to keep doing it because you know that I'm the one who put them in and it wasn't an AI model.
Yeah,
I did see a great tweet that was like accusing someone of using AI as this generation's witch hunt, like accusing them of being a witch, because it's just like, God, but yeah.
Yeah. Hey, ChatGPT, is this AI?
God. Well, everybody, it has been a stressful conversation, but we hope that you all learned something about AI, and go check out Karen Hao's book. It was a really good read.
I love working on this show because I get to learn from people way smarter than me, so always appreciate it, Ariel.
I like working on the show because Josh tells me I'm smart, and that feels nice.
Yeah. If I can plug one thing, just this summer we launched Industry Plant. It's an indie podcast network that I started. We have a bunch of excellent shows. AJ and Ariel are two of our excellent hosts. And if you guys want to check us out, we're at industryplant.media on Instagram. Industryplantmedia.com is our website where you can check out the other shows. And there's too many just people, bros sitting with microphones talking about how celery is spicy. So let's have some actual conversations with some depth. Let's talk about some important, impactful issues. And hope you guys enjoy.
Yeah, and you guys are actually listening to Josh all the time because he is very much a part of the fabric of getting these episodes out. You just usually don't hear him actually in the cast. So
totally appreciate you, Ariel.
All right, bye. Have a good week, everybody.
Actually Useful is part of the Industry Plant Podcast Network. It's co-hosted by Ariel Butters and AJ Weaver. It's executive produced and edited by Josh Stratton Carlson. If you like the show, please consider subscribing to our Substack or YouTube at Actually Useful Pod, or give us a follow on most social media platforms.